Titles, titles, titles. So many titles. What's good? What's bad? What is meaningful? And what titles are the equivalent of an overpriced multifunctional paperweight slash desk ornament slash home invasion weapon, because that's the only thing you're going to be using that for if you're wasting your time chasing for the real title. I'll be covering and rating them all. This is Office Honcho's guide to world titles in boxing. Before we discuss world titles of today, we need to cover why are there belt organizations today. Back in the old days, there was technically one title that signified that you were the legitimate world champion of the division, which was just called the world title. But there were plenty of titles outside the world title. You had the national title and state title. State titles were title championship bouts sanctioned by that state. Example, Safrino Garcia was once the California state champion of the welterweight division. Now the New York state title held the most weight out of all the state titles. If you held the world title, national boxing, and New York title, you were considered the undisputed champion of that weight class. It's 3 belts you technically have to hold to be undisputed. National boxing and New York state titles ran from 1921 to 1963. The reason why these titles had to go and there needed to be a reform was due to massive corruption, national and racial biases. There were many fighters who were supposed to fight for the title, but due to any of these I just stated, they never got their shot despite earning it. You know it's a problem in the system where you are told to take a dive and lose a fight, but in return you are promised a title shot your next fight. A champion's team can turn down a fight against the obvious #1 contender because of their controversial lifestyle. Example, Floyd Patterson versus Sonny Liston. Patterson was highly advised by the NAACP to not give Liston a title shot because of his poor representation to the African American community due to his alleged ties with the mob and his criminal record.
He wouldn't want to fight another fighter because of certain things he have did. There must be some doubt in that fella's mind that he can't beat the other fighter.
The NAACP wanted a figure like Patterson to motivate and uplift during these incredibly awful times, and Liston was not their guy.
And those things wouldn't have been bad necessarily for either the white public or the black public, except that he came along during the height of the civil rights movement.
The NAACP in particular was looking for black role models, blacks to look up to. Floyd Patterson was one of those.
The NAACP, they were very unhappy with Liston's negative image, and they begged Patterson, please don't take the fight.
Patterson, the gentleman he is, ignored the demands and gave Liston the title shot because he earned it and did not judge him based on his alleged lifestyle.
I think he's proved himself as far as being the #1 contender is concerned. I personally think that he has every right to fight for the championship despite his unfortunate background.
They didn't want me to fight him either because there was a good chance of him winning the fight. And I guess if he should win the fight, he would represent the black race. I just felt that here's a man who's had a very similar life to mine, and I felt that he should get a chance, so I overrode my manager and I gave him a shot.
As boxing was spreading all over the world, the opportunity for fighters from other countries to participate in world title contentions was obviously slim as stated. The WBA and later the WBC was formed. The WBA in 1962 and the WBC in 1963. Remember I mentioned the National Boxing Association title? The WBA went from them, it was refounded and renamed, switching national to world. If you took a look at these organizations and where they founded and based now, they are in, for the most part, neutral locations. The WBC is based in Mexico and the WBA is in Panama. Coincidentally, this matches Sammy Gravano's testimony when the mob families decided to transition out of boxing.
When did organized crime walk away from the boxing industry?
In the time when Rocky Marciano and people like that were involved, our people, meaning mob people, were involved, and we had closer ties to boxing, and I would imagine there was a lot more betting and a lot more situations.
Would that have been in the 1950 time frame, 50s,
50s, 60s, yes, that's why I said in the 60s and before.
as they lost most of their power to where instead of being the head of operations, they have to contact a middleman and spend a lot more effort and resources to get what they want, which wasn't 100% guaranteed they will get what they want.
When did organized crime get back into boxing?
Watts arranged a meeting for me with Joey Curtis, a boxing referee in Las Vegas. Joey Curtis has once visited our club, the Ravenite Social Club, in New York City. Curtis said he could move Snipe up in the rankings of the World Boxing Council, which is based in Mexico. Curtis said that this would cost $10,000, but because it was a favor for John Gotti, he might be able to get it done for about $5,000.
So now it's only 2 belts to become undisputed. This system worked for quite a while, but there was still quite a bit of corruption with the presidents that stepped in within the WBC organizations, with Justiniano Montana of the Philippines and Roman G. Velasquez as the president. Jose Suleiman was appointed as the president in 1975, and I would say in the early reign, he became a hero to the sport and organization for cleaning up the corruption.
2 sanctioning bodies. Now, what's the deal on that? The WBC, which you represent, right?
Well, no, I don't represent either of them, the WBC or the WBA. I have boxers that are under their aegis in their rankings.
Yeah.
They both are very nice organizations. I think the WBC is one that is most notable. It has 100 or more countries that it represents, and is doing a great job of doing that.
With both organizations, you really started to see a diverse amount of fighters being given the opportunity to fight for the world title, something that would be very unachievable years prior. You had many champions from Asia and Europe getting shots, and most certainly a lot more fighters from Mexico were given the opportunity to fight for the title as well.
But why do we need 2 of these guys?
Well, I hear many complaints, many criticisms, many accusations, but no alternatives, so therefore you have to deal with what is real, and what is real is that they exist, and they're doing a quite capable job, because boxing has a resurgence now that is unprecedented.
Well, that's certainly true. It seems to be more and more fights and more televised fights, and I would guess that the actual attendance is higher than it used to be.
Tremendous. It boggles the mind.
Before the WBC and WBA was formed in the early 60s, there was only 5 champions from Mexico. Only 3 held the legitimate world title. After these organizations were formed in the past 10 years, you saw a massive surge of unseen talent from the country of Mexico that unfortunately before 1963 would have been unheard of. Besides all of that, it's more money and more promotion on the world scale to the general public in every country.
It was the night when boxer Kim Gi-soo defeated his taller and more skilled Western opponent to become the first Korean to win the World Boxing Championship.
세계 챔피언 그 이름은 한국의 아들 김기수 선수. 대한민국 국민도 할 수 있다. 대한민국 체력도 세계 챔피언이 될 수 있다는 것. 이것으로 인해서 그 국민들의 사기가
Korea's confidence helped the nation achieve a double-digit GDP growth rate for the first time.
It's amazing homecoming sites like these of Jae Do-ya winning the WBA lineal junior middleweight title in 1975, that boxing is a worldwide sport, and having it predominantly centered in America to where in order to make it in the sport, you have to go there, thus bottlenecking the sport's potential. Reasons why sports like rugby, baseball, and football is much more popular on the worldwide scale than American football. Though the NFL generates plenty of revenue and viewership domestically, their lack of cultivating an international audience and league development early, like the rest of the sports mentioned, has really bit them in the butt. So this is a brief explanation why the titles of old had to go and these new belts took over. Time to move to Chapter 2, National and Regional Titles. Since boxing is a worldwide sport, when there's thousands fighting, you're gonna need a streamlined ranking system to where a fighter is ranked upon both on a national and regional scale. These are very important titles. If you're not some hotshot linked up with an influential promotion and network, you're gonna need these credentials. America is the only country I know of where the media has completely devalued these titles. And the rest of these nations where boxing is relevant, they are celebrated among the fans and press.
There's nothing lacking there, and if he can crack the heel into that kind of fight, then he becomes the favourite.
Hilariously, if you paid attention when playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, Mac fought for all those belts. Well, a non-copywritten rendition of them. How do you think he got the shot against Mike Tyson? For the UK, the Commonwealth and British title are the most important titles one can get to become a contender. For the rest of the European countries, they do have their own national title. The regional title for all of Europe is the EBU title. Some fighters from the UK may actually get all 3 titles before getting a title shot based on what's happening in the weight class. Billy Joe Saunders is a perfect example. He held the EBU, Commonwealth, and British Empire title before ultimately getting a shot to fight Andy Lee for the WBO middleweight title. If you're an American boxer, you're going to need the following: the USBA, NABO, and NABF. The USBA title signifies you are the best in the USA. The next step up is the regional belts, NABO and NABF. These signify you're the best in North America. NABO is linked up with the WBO, and the USBA is linked up with the IBF. The best recent example of a young fighter who is not going to get the shot at the title, and if he really wanted that shot as fast as possible and early, was Teofimo Lopez. He took the hardest, most textbook route to earning his shot at the title. I call it the B-side route. This is what Lopez did. He moved up the national ranks. He did beat a ranked WBC opponent, but that doesn't matter. He won't get the shot with the WBC. We will cover that later. After that fight, he fights for the NABF and USBA title. He is now in the world ranks and ranked by the IBF organization. And after that, in 2 title elimination fights, he is in the finals against the OPBF champion, Masayoshi Nakatani. The OPBF title signifies you're the best in Asia. Lopez wins, and he is now in line to fight for the IBF title against Richard Kame. Man, already 1,400 words in. Let's get to what you've been waiting for, the world titles. WBO organization was founded in 1988, and despite it being not recognized as a legitimate belt organization by all the organizations till 2007, I feel like very quickly when it was spawned, it was the fighters who earned, defended, and unified the title made it legitimate way before it was made official. The super middleweight division with legends such as Chris Eubank, Nigel Benn, Steve Collins, and Joe Calzaghe, super flyweight with Johnny Tapia, super bantamweight with Marco Antonio Barrera, featherweight Prince Nassim Hamed, and light heavyweight with the great Darius Mikushevsky.
You made it all the way to Albuquerque, my brother. We made it, baby. It's been a long road.
Moving up with the WBO is pretty straightforward, as they have regional sectors that all meet up to the world title. NABO, the North American body. Asian Pacific, I believe the Asian Pacific title also includes the Oceania region as well, so New Zealand and Australia. Unlike with the WBA, WBA has an Oceania title, which I feel like for boxing it should be the whole Pacific region. I sort of see this with football, with the Australian national team back in the day, how hard it was for them to qualify for the World Cup because they were stuck in the Oceania division. Not only you have to win the division, but also have to beat the 5th ranked South American team. Since FIFA woke up and used some common sense, Australia was finally moved to the AFC. So after that, we have the WBO International and Intercontinental title. The Intercontinental title, for the most part, is useless. You may not move up in rankings fighting with this title. It is just something to hold on to while you're waiting for an actual opportunity. The Intercontinental title is far meaningful, helps you move up in rank and earn a title shot, as this is pretty much the interim title. Now you have the WBO title. There's a super title, but it's not like the WBA where it spawns 2 titles, a regular title and a super title, thus creating confusion. WBO's super title is rather unique. When promoted as super champion, one of the main purposes of its existence is to pursue becoming an undisputed champion, or simply doing something great. So you are given an extension when it comes to making mandatory defenses. You can be promoted super champion depending on your quality of opponents, multiple bout contract with a TV network, and if you don't have none of that, minimum 10 fight title defenses. Lastly, this is the best privilege becoming the super champion. You can directly challenge a WBO champion in a higher or lower weight class, as you will become their automatic mandatory challenger. Pros and cons. What I just mentioned earlier are definitely the pros, and the cons is the purse bids and orders depending on politically divided lines of the promotion and TV networks, which really never goes anywhere. Very rarely you will see an Al Heyman Showtime PBC fighter fighting for the WBO title, unless it's a huge unification fight, more than likely for the undisputed title. If not, it gets dragged moved on, like the Crawford versus Porter matchup, or ultimately not happening, like Quillen versus Korobov. Also, a fun fact before we move on, Japan did not recognize the WBO as a legitimate organization, so for the longest you never saw a fighter from Japan hold the WBO and the IBF title. Now, I don't know if this is true, but the WBC and WBA had a deal with the JBC many years back where they will give their fighters more of a chance to have a crack at the title if they only recognize them. Example, the 2009 unification between Hozumi Hasegawa and Fernando Montiel was unofficial because the JBC did not recognize the WBO and IBF titles. Though the JBC did not honor it, the WBO will sanction this as a unification bout for the WBO champion Montiel, and his belt was on the line alongside WBC champions Hozumi Hasegawa's. WBA, pretty much one big ol' headache here. So they have their own regional belts, but the most important thing to discuss here is the funky titles outside of that. You have the gold, regular, and the super. Now, the big problem with these three belts is most don't know the difference between them, to where promotions and networks know that, so they will just go ahead and promote it like it's a legitimate world title fight. The promotion to the Barrios versus Davis fight was a complete false advertisement. Josh Taylor is the undisputed champion and holds the real WBA title. Apparently this man didn't exist in the promotion leading up, and this fight was promoted in a fashion where made you believe Barrios held the real title, in which, in this case, Barrios held a glorified interim title. And in recent news, the WBA retires the interim title. So now, the gold title is the interim title for the regular title, and the regular title is the interim title for the super title. The WBO did their super status right because it does not create any confusion who's the actual legitimate champion. Okay, let's explain the regular title in its purest form. When there is not a super champion, whoever holds the WBA title is a legitimate WBA champion. Usually after several title defenses or a unification, that fighter is promoted to super status, and then we get this abomination of a vacant regular title, in which we'll just call it the false title. The only positive thing about having a regular title when there's a super champ is you receive champion salary, and it could be falsely advertised as a legitimate world title match. But regular champions when there's a super champ cannot unify at all. You can only unify with the super champion or just fight your mandatory opponents. It is very rare we will even see a WBA versus WBA super unifications, because mostly these fighters are in different networks or it is not in the promotion's interest in making the fight happen. There used to be a huge difference between the regular title and the super title. The super title resembled a world title from the early 1900s, which was pretty freaking cool. Now today, at first glance, you cannot tell the difference between the two. The saddest recent case with the WBA happened in the super featherweight division. Takashi Uchiyama became the WBA champion in 2010. After several defenses, he was promoted to super status. He was dethroned by Jezreel Corrales in 2016 and loses a rematch. Jezreel Corrales is a WBA super champion, and somehow when he was making his defense against Alberto Machado, the titles did the old switcheroo. Machado wins the vacant regular title off of Corrales, and Gervonta Davis fights Jesus Cuellar for the vacant super title. Now keep in mind, Jesus had not fought in almost 2 years, and on top of that, never fought at super featherweight. So how was he even given a shot in the first place? So this situation here is a big headache because Machado beat the man that beat the man, then later lost to Cancio. Then Cancio lost it to Alvarado, and now currently held by Roger Gutierrez. So when there's an obvious popular A-side fighter in the weight class, the WBA is not really the best organization for the little man, the B-side man. Now this is the easiest segment to cover. The IBF is the most straightforward, least confusing organization. I love how this organization is more lean to B-side fighters, real wild cards in the sport. If you can hold the weight and do your duties as champion fighting your mandatories, you can really go places holding this title. IBF was formed in 1983. Out of the 4 belt organizations, the IBF is the only organization based in America. It did not take long at all for the IBF to be recognized as a legitimate organization, spawning the 3-belt era. Out of all the belt organizations, they are the most strict when it comes to mandatory defenses. Perfect example of fighters truly using the best of what the IBF has to offer is Bernard Hopkins and Winky Wright. These are guys who never got the opportunity to even move an inch through any other belt organization ranks besides the IBF. They were able to win a title. Since this is a legitimate title, if they do their job and fight their mandatory opponents, if they stick around long enough, huge opportunities will come their way. In Hopkins' case, Tito Trinidad moved up to middleweight, and a tournament was formed to unify the division, automatically putting Hopkins in, which Hopkins finally had his coming out party defeating Trinidad. For Wright, he got a shot to fight Sugar Shane Mosley for the undisputed junior middleweight title, beating him twice, giving Wright mainstream attention and credibility he righteously deserved. Former champion Tevin Farmer is another great example. This is a guy no promotion cared about, no network or belt organization besides the IBF, and trust me, before he got a shot at the IBF, he tried with other organizations and got shut down. He was able to win the IBF title, and it opened up many doors for him to where in the year 2021, he's out here living his best life. Widely considered the best looking, most sought after, and the most famous title. I mean, come on now, we see an anime right here. I mean, when you think of world titles, you think of the WBC. So if you're a fighter, there are 4 things you need to ask yourself before you put up the effort to move up the ranks of this organization. Is there any popular fighters in the weight class? Am I from a country that has a profitable fan base? Am I a B-side fighter? Am I with an influential promotion and TV network? The sooner you come to a realization you don't have at least 2 of these features, or maybe even 3, this is not the organization you should immediately go after for a title run because you're going to be waiting. The WBC is that fancy restaurant that has a waiting list that stretches out to next year and then some for openings, and many fighters end up falling to this.
Hey, this isn't faux dive. This is a dive.
You're a long way from home, yuppie boy. I'll start a tab.
Don't let me get started on the mandatories, how poorly enforced it is on A-side fighters, but my gosh, if you happen to be a B-side, you better be ready to get thrown out to the wolves. So they got their own regional titles, pretty straightforward. Then we get to the Diamond. That title is pretty much, hey, sorry, we can't get you a shot at the moment for the real title because, you know, politics. So here you go. This title is useless. You think that got Pacquiao closest to a shot at the WBC title after defeating Cotto? Absolutely not. So now you have the silver title, and depending who you are, it may be a short wait to the title shot, or, and I mean a very emphasized or, you will be waiting 3 to never getting that shot. So I have 3 examples of fighters gathering dust. Thailand Srisaket Rungvisai. So Rungvisai wins the WBC Super Flyweight title before a hotshot A-side fighter comes into contention. He will lose the title in a rather close fight against that hotshot A-side fighter. Rungvisai, the great fighter he is, easily rose back up through those rankings, winning the WBC regional belt, then to defeat Jose Salgado for the WBC silver title to earn his rematch for the title, becoming Cuadras' mandatory May of 2015. Rungvisai had to wait almost 2 years to fight once again for the title. Unfortunately, he didn't have to get his revenge against Cuadras, but he became a household name, beating #1 pound-for-pound star Roman Gonzalez twice, then to become the Ring Magazine champion against Juan Francisco Estrada, earning worldwide credentials. Estrada earned his shot for the rematch in late 2018, and you best believe Rungvisai had to defend that belt or be stripped the first thing in 2019. Rungvisai will lose, but he was in line to fight the winner of Gonzalez Estrada too. Well, what do you think happens? Estrada wins, the WBC makes Estrada the franchise champion, which Estrada can freely go for a rematch against Gonzalez, leaving the mandatory Rungvisai to once again play the waiting game. WBC recently ordered Rungvisai will fight the winner of the rematch, which if so will take place in 2022, but who really knows? Second example, Eleider Alvarez. My gosh, Alvarez was a silver champion from 2014 to 2018. He was Stevenson's mandatory from 2015 and on. Stevenson somehow went 5 years without fighting a mandatory, which by rules you have to face 1 a year. Stevenson's last mandatory opponent prior to the Alexander fight in December 2018 was in November 2013 against Tony Bellew. Just wow, this man would have been dethroned ages ago under the IBF, or better yet the WBA organization. Even Ring Magazine thought his title reign was not of quality and stripped him of the Ring title, which I have never heard of such a reasoning by Ring Magazine to strip a fighter of a title. And example 3, which is a recent one by the way, poor old old Dylan White. He became the #1 challenger in 2017 for the WBC title. It's been 4 years, now going on 5 years. He has the interim title, defending it on supposedly October 30th. I don't know why he's risking his rank and interim title, because if he loses like he did against Povetkin, I don't think he will get a generous second chance. With the Alvarez situation, you can at least make a case that Stevenson's promoter, who happened to be Alvarez's, was purposely manipulating and exploiting the WBC rules to prevent two of his fighters from fighting each other for years. By this point, Dylan White could have made it up to IBF rankings, fought for the title, lost, rebounded, and lost again, and potentially be in another run for the title. I'm not even joking, I'm dead ass serious here. Tony Thompson hilariously almost fought Klitschko a third time if he would have gotten past Pulev August of 2013. Klitschko, who was a man on a mission trying to become undisputed champion and bring his brother's WBC title back home, would have taken the fight knowing he would be stripped if he didn't fight Thompson. Though this segment completely makes it sound like I have it in for these guys, I don't, but from a fan's perspective, this is irritating as hell, and these are things that need to be brought to attention, and I hope one day they will fix it. But overall, I appreciate what they do for the community through their charity organization, which they are doing quite a bit around the world, 166 countries to be exact, donating to hospitals, gyms, youth centers, and orphanages. Israel Vasquez is a great champion who put everything on the line and was in absolute need to get a surgery to save his eyes so he won't be permanently blind. The WBC paid for the entire treatment and recovery process. These are some wholesome acts of generosity you don't really see all too much in the sport. I also appreciate the WBC convention. The convention that is held all around the world, all these great champions from all walks of nationalities, current and former, flown out and given a red carpet-like treatment where they are celebrated by attendees who probably never even had the opportunity to even catch a glimpse in person of these great fighters. Just by personal experience, when I was working at Canelo Jacobs Fight Week, which just happened to be the week of a WBC convention, I ran into my favorite fighter I grew up watching. I would literally wake up at 5 a.m. to tune into his fights. Former 3-time division champion Hizumi Hasegawa. If it wasn't for the WBC convention, I would have never met him. The odds were already low from the start for me. Another pro is the Champion Emeritus title, in which I believe the WBA has one of their own, which they call Champion Recess. I do like the idea of this title when properly used. I know there was some controversy with the Pacquiao fight when he was supposed to fight Spence, but that matchup was a real surprise to all. A great example of this title being used was when Vitaly Klitschko was forced to retire due to an injury in 2005. He was named Champion Emeritus by the WBC, and once he was fully healed up and ready, in which he really could have had a tune-up fight but didn't, he exercised his rights as Champion Emeritus and became the immediate mandatory to fight champion Samuel Peter, beating him to regain the title. Ring title in its early days was really stepping on the feet of the lineal champions, so it became quite controversial in the beginning, with examples such as Darius Mikushevsky, who became the lineal light heavyweight champion, defeating Virgil Hill for the WBA, IBF, and WBO titles in 1997. But if you check Ring Magazine, they have Roy Jones Jr. listed as a legitimate champion of the division, with Darius Mikushevsky ranked at number 1. It was also the same at flyweight, with Wong Jung Kam, who was the WBC and lineal champion, yet ranked at number 2 by Ring Magazine, and a legitimate title considered vacant. So besides that, it's pretty straightforward. Number 1 must fight number 2. In rare cases, it could be number 1 and number 3, I believe. I think that's pretty much a wrap. In conclusion, pros and cons. WBO, pros, easy to follow. It has the best of both worlds when it comes to allowing fighters to do something great, try to get a unification, go after a fighter from another weight class, and enforcing mandatory defenses. Cons, you're limited to who you can fight, based on politically divided lines between networks and promotions. Most who have the WBO belt is with Top Rank, ESPN, Matchroom DAZN, or an affiliate of the two networks. Those title holders have little to no chance of fighting a fighter from a rival network such as PBC Al Haymon, unless it's for the undisputed title. WBA, pros. Fighters first, more money to fighters since it's vaguely promoted as a title fight. Cons, belts look the same and leave fans confused. IBF, pros. My opinion, Second best looking belt. Favors the fans and the fighters. Gives B-side fighters great opportunity to succeed in the sport. Cons. Hard to keep. Strictly enforced rules that in some cases hold a successful fighter back. Mostly where if you're a multi-belt holder, you need to pick your opponents within the IBF first and hope they are ranked to make one defense into 2 or 3 at the same time. If not, you more than likely have to make an IBF defense, then a defense of the rest of the belts on another night. WBC, exclusive and hard to get to. Best looking belt, amazing charitable programs, values and honor former champions. Cons, not B-side friendly, inconsistent when enforcing rules, inconsistent in enforcing mandatory defenses. Ring title, unique aesthetic in today's world. No mandatory opponent, but you can be stripped by the lack of quality opponents or inactivity. Promote events as a title fight, receive champion purse, and pay no sanction fees. Cons, mostly not on the same page as lineal champions unless they became undisputed. My opinion, my favorite organization is the IBF, but I know that the IBF does have their drawbacks. There are fighters who would flourish under this organization and some who would not based on the organization system. I think for a fighter it's important to figure out what organization suits them the best for what they want to achieve and get out of the sport. Some fighters want to be great, some just want to work and earn a living and maybe do a great thing here and there, because at the end of the day, boxing is not only a sport but it's a job as well. So with all the information said in this video, what is your favorite belt organization and what is the best organization that does justice for all fighters and the fans? And on top of that, this is boxing's world title guide. I hope I don't have to make another video on this. Be sure to like, share, if you're new, subscribe to the Patreon for early access and patron-backed projects. I'm Alpha Sancho, and I'm out.